everyone. My name is Mark Vina, host of the SmartTechCheck podcast. Today is Monday, July 1st, 2024. Smart technology in cars enhances safety through features like advanced driver assistance systems, otherwise known as ADAS, which help prevent accidents and protect passengers. It also improves convenience and efficiency with capabilities such as real-time navigation, traffic updates, and automated parking. Additionally, smart technology supports the shift towards sustainable transportation by optimizing fuel efficiency and integrating electrical vehicle systems. Infineon is one of the world's recognized leaders in the smart car technology ingredient space. And I'm excited to have Andrew Hunter on today's podcast to discuss his role in overseeing this vital business for Infineon. Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Mark. It's great to be here. Really happy to talk about the automotive industry here and at Infineon.
Well, it's such an exciting category. When you hear smart technology, people sometimes, focus on just EVs. And as you well know, because you oversee the business over there, smart technology is available in today's cars. It's actually been available in many, many cars for the last 15 years or so. And smart technology in the various subsystems that exist has been growing as an overall part of the BOM, which is intriguing. I forget who the executive was. There was an industry luminary that said, a car is nothing but a computer on wheels.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of truth to that. But before we go into that, I want to bring up your background. I think that's real important to set the stage for what we're going to talk about. So let me do that, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I moved into this new role, basically responsible for the automotive business for Infineon in the Americas. And so I started that at the beginning of the year. Been in semiconductors for the last 25 plus years. Before automotive, I was very involved in IoT. And I think what's interesting, in this discussion is when I got involved in IoT was before it was even called IoT. We just called it embedded wireless, right? And we were working with ecosystem partners, and there were a lot of hurdles to get over. So have experience there. And it's actually, there's some similarities there in the sense that when IoT began, I remember people, they were saying, 5 billion devices are going to be connected by, in the next 5 years. And I remember talking to people who are, very intelligent people in tech on, I don't believe in IoT, right? They just, and that, there was interesting conversations around that, but now we're at a place that we're beyond that. And there's just, everybody's got, 5, 10, 20 devices connected in their house, and it's pervasive, right? And, I see a little bit of that going on in automotive, right? There's been some disruption and changes, and in my new role, people are like, oh, they want to talk about automotive now, and like, I don't know, I don't believe in this EV thing or what have you, right? And so super excited to be in this business now as it's had some disruption, right? And excited to be leading a really, really good team of marketing, sales, and applications folks who really understand all the different systems in the automobile.
Well, and there's a lot of synergy between the smart car space and the IoT space. So obviously you bring a lot of learnings to that area. And the other thing I would say, and I hate, I can't do a podcast without mentioning those two magic letters. All this momentum is even without the catalyst that AI is going to cause. AI adds another level of I think energy to this category that I'm sure you'll reference during the podcast. But it's truly an interesting period. Infineon is very lucky to have you there in a very, very important business, obviously, at the company. So let's talk about your role and, maybe at a high level, some of your priorities, some of the experiences you bring into it, and we'll just go from there.
Yeah. Well, like I was saying, again, just super honored to have this role, and not just at any company, at Infineon. I mean, we're the world's number one automotive semiconductor company in the world, right? And so,
Yeah.
at a very basic level, just super lucky to be involved with the people that I'm involved with, both in my team in the Americas, but also many of the folks that work in our different business lines and product lines, and what they're thinking, and where we're going, from a technology perspective. And then of course the customers, right? And so all of the large manufacturers, as well as the tier ones, and also even in the technology companies that are sort of jumping into this computer on wheels, right? And so um,
Hey, folks, this is Mark Vina, CEO of Smart Tech Research. Smart Tech Research is proud to have Aura sponsoring my Smart Tech Check podcast. Aura security software is the all-in-one digital safety net for the whole family. It's literally like having a personal cyber guardian that protects all of the devices in your home on a 24/7 basis. What's more, its AI functionality stands out as it constantly learns and adapts to threats, keeping your family and you safe around the clock. It's a must-have solution for anyone serious about online security. Stay tuned for a special no-obligation promo offer for Aura that will give you cybersecurity peace of mind.
Hi, I'm Anna with Smart Tech Research. Whether you're browsing the web, checking emails, monitoring your children's online behavior, spam calls and identity protection, and conducting online transactions, Aura has your back, ensuring a secure and seamless experience every time. Aura's comprehensive security solutions are compatible with Microsoft Windows, Apple Mac OS, Android, iOS, and iPad OS devices. For an exclusive 14-day no-obligation trial version of Aura, use the on-screen QR code or visit the website shown here. Aura is the smart, simple way to stay safe online.
Yeah, and then then there's the disruption that is happening, and quite frankly, it started gaining a lot of momentum with EVs, right? I mean, what Tesla has done is truly amazing,
Yes.
and they take a very different approach than what has been done in the past, and they iterate fast, right? And so I think a lot of that has really changed sort of the direction of the automotive industry, and that's kind of the disruption I reference, right? And so yeah, exciting role, exciting company, and exciting times.
Well, not. I'm sure it's an exciting role. There's no. You're right in the middle of the mix of all these things. But it's always intrigued me about Infineon, and it's especially true in the automotive space, is that when you're working with a car manufacturer, and we're talking about cars that have 50, 60, $70,000 or more, you are selling lots of silicon, lots of capability into that car, and a lot of this technology is bleeding edge. The automotive space is one of those. It's been around for a long period of time. They like consistency. They like the ability to. They like the ability to plan in advance. They don't like surprises. If you're proposing a technology that works, a subsystem can hold up the production of a $60,000 car. So the fact that Infineon has such a great built-in reputation with the the major automotive manufacturers is really a testament to the company. Because again, I'm an old design in person during my days at Synaptics, which was it's still around, a very successful capacitive touch company, and they're now into other things. You can regardless of what you can't have a $5 part, a $20 part, or a $50 part hold up a product that has a very high ASP. So you might want to talk a little bit about that and to Infineon's design-in capability, because I think it's just a matter of trust, and obviously you guys have it.
Yeah, it takes tremendous amount of knowledge in each of the systems that exist in the car, right? And it's also there's been a lot of churn in this disruption, where one of the pieces is the software-defined vehicle, right? And so you have so much more software that runs on these cars.
Yes.
How do you manage that software, right? And so there's a lot of thinking about how that's done. A good example actually is in the news this week, right? VW just invested $5 billion into Rivian, right? Why did they do that? Software, right?
Yes.
You know,
Yeah. No. That's a great analogy, because it's all about, and it's about software systems that work well together, because very often you may have 7 or 8 different subsystems. They have their own unique software stack, but they have to talk to each other to optimize their efficiency. So that's not a trivial capability.
Right. Right.
So when we kind of talk about how EVs are disrupting the space, because there's a lot of disruption going on, let's talk about what we were talking about before in terms of kind of the parallels with IoT, which you were very much ensconced with before you got into this new role.
Yeah, I mean, I hit on it a little bit before. One of the challenges in IoT for manufacturers was getting it to connect to the network, right? How do you get a sprinkler controller to connect to the network, right? And a
Right.
lot of those, a lot of those issues have been somewhat solved, and it's getting easier. When you talk about an automobile, especially if you're trying to um, implement or invoke autonomous or semi-autonomous driving, right? There's a lot of, you mentioned AI earlier, right? And when we talk about software, a lot of that's going to be, or could be run using AI. And is that AI it's in the automobile, or is it somewhere else in a server, right? Obviously, there's a lot of different opinions on that, and reasons why you do one versus the other. But software, I think, is a huge part of it. And I think the other piece that's really changing is how you might take a system that's been centralized in a vehicle, and how do you break it apart? And there's a variety of reasons why you would want to have what you would call different zones. So there's this zonal architecture that's being
Mhm.
implemented, and we can get into that in more detail. But there's just you know, and a lot of that really is even before you start to talk about electrification, right? So an EV then changes things dramatically. I mean, pretty soon you won't be able to buy a car with any hydraulic fluid in it, right? And so you'll be braking electronically, you're steering electronically, and then if you're driving with electricity, it just everything starts to change, right? So um, it's it's a different way of thinking, and then the other piece is really the speed at which things have to change now, right? For someone to be able to buy an EV under $25,000, we've got to make some more changes, right? It's been rather elusive, right? And so, yeah, and then you know the charging piece is super interesting, especially with the recent moves where a lot of the large established manufacturing automobile manufacturers have opted to use Tesla's network and say, hey, well, let's use this, right? And so that's where you're playing with your competitors, and again, more sort of more disruption there. Yeah.
But specific to IoT, though, one of the things, and I know you'll agree with me on this, is that for the most part, IoT have to be very efficient from a power utilization device. Not all IoT devices have power careabouts, but most do. And I imagine that level of expertise and your involvement in a lot of that work at Infineon prior comes into play in a very relevant way, because at the end of the day, it's wonderful that all these subsystems in a car, especially an EV, that were every milliamp of power is important to maximize the range of a car. Talk to me a little bit about that, because that is important. I mean, you can have all these great, again, subsystems that do all kinds of wonderful things. We could talk about, usage models. Cars are becoming almost like mini theaters as well, with multiple screens, and it's almost like a movie theater on wheels if you
Yeah.
sit in the back seat. But talk to me a little bit about the energy efficiency and why that's so important, because again, the way that you guys implement technology, many of these subsystems are highly power efficient, and they have to be, because you have to maximize the battery life of the car. So can we talk a little bit about that for a second, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned sort of some parallels with IoT, right? I mean, I remember some of the first IoT cameras that you'd be able to get, right? And you had to change those batteries every 3 months. And then companies such as Amazon came out with a camera that you put a couple double A's and 3 years later it's still working.
Yeah,
It's
right.
and because they learned a lot of tricks, right? Hey, I'm not going to turn this Wi-Fi on until I know there's something I need to send, right?
Right.
Right, and so it's that fast and that happened quickly, right? And so it's that fast iteration that really improves things, and so with EVs eking out, I mean, I want a car that can get 500 miles before I have to recharge it, right? And so utilizing new silicon carbide and even GaN is coming, and using maybe both of those in conjunction.
Yes.
And so all those things are coming, and getting there faster is is what'll really continue to impact that, right? Um, but you see Tesla still has one of the most efficient systems around because they've been at it for longer.
Yes. Right.
And but also they're iterating quickly, right? And so the others are catching up. And the good news is that the the range is getting much better across the board, right? The other disruption though is also on architecture. So you have the zonal EE architecture, which has changed things as well. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And to your point, the pace of this technology development is, I mean, there's a lot of creative words I can come up with it.
Yeah.
But the reality is that, these are this category is not for companies who are like to proceed at a slow pace.
Yeah.
So
And and
it's really,
And that's
I'm
been
sorry.
disruptive. Sorry, Mark. Yeah, I mean, that's been disruptive, right? Because a lot of these companies, they they,
They're
they
not
haven't
used to it.
they haven't
Right.
wanted to move, right? And so a good example of that is Tesla said, hey, we don't want to use a 12-volt battery. We want to go 48. And there's a lot
Yes.
of reasons to do that. But really, that wasn't being driven anywhere else, right? And so, I look forward to when all of these companies are operating in a similar way, right?
Yeah.
And really looking to innovate.
Well, let's talk again about some of these areas that, I mean, this is essentially a profile of the way folks are using these cars. Now, there's a lot of deep diving. We could spend 3 hours on just this slide alone. But talk a little bit about this and how it ties to the priorities at Infineon in the automotive space.
Sure. So zero emissions, I mean, we as a company, we're absolutely dedicated to electrification, which is all about decarbonization, right? And so, although there's been a slowdown in growth, there's still growth in EVs, but there's a lot of things that have to happen there to make it real, right? And so, we have entirely different divisions, products that I don't sell that are being sold into the charging network, right? The
Yeah.
electrical grid.
Yes.
And, people, a lot of people were saying, I don't know about the EVs, the grid's not ready, this isn't ready. I mean, people forget that when cars first came around, people said, I'm not getting rid of my horse. That was, come on, they can eat grass anywhere. I mean, why would I do that? Right. And then I don't have a gas can at my house. And you used to go to these garages and someone would run out with a big red can. And people we weren't around when a lot of that was happening. And so it takes a little bit of time, but I definitely think this is going to become real, but it takes a lot of work. There's chips in all of this. And lucky for us, we're well aligned with it. Not surprisingly, it's a big part of our really our vision. And also you've got a driver becomes a passenger. Right now it's more about sort of semi-autonomous, but
Yeah.
there's we got in San Francisco and in LA, there's driverless cabs that you can get into today, right? And so that's super exciting. There's a lot of sensors, a lot more compute. in those systems, but they're already there in most of the new cars that you buy. So yeah, definitely smarter car today than it ever was.
And I was going to make that exact point is that, the autonomous driving phenomenon really hasn't completely exploded yet. It has in certain pockets. And, you referenced, there in San Francisco and other cities, by the way.
Yeah.
I think I was in Phoenix a few weeks ago, and I saw it quite a bit in Scottsdale.
Yeah.
I think Waymo was out there in a pretty big way. If you had to put your prognostication hat on, when do you think, and again, this is just, off the cuff, when we'll really see major autonomous driving? Were we talking 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What kind of time cycle are we talking about?
Yeah, I think it's 5 to 10 until people really have it impacting their lives versus, my daughter who lives in San Francisco says, hey, I took a ride in an autonomous cab, right? I mean, it's more about people no longer buying vehicles. Instead,
Yes.
they're just hailing a cab, right? And I think we're still a ways away from that to become commonplace. And so yeah, I would put it more in the 5 to 10 years out.
Yeah, but it's going to happen. I mean, I'm sure that if you flash back 100 years ago when the transition was going from the horse and buggy to the early cars, there were probably folks that were saying, hey, that's never going to happen. They break down too frequently. They're too expensive. You flash forward 100 years and, we it's hard to even remember that the horse and buggy was a primary mode of transportation a century ago. Just maybe a couple of comments last on the smarter car part of it in that, and the angle that I really want you to come at is that, again, this is not all about just EVs. I mean,
Right.
even today's cars, and you could, like I said at the top of the podcast, you could argue for the last 10 years, cars have really become much smarter just in the last decade. But talk to me a little bit about that in terms of, what you're seeing as real high priorities in terms of defining what smart is.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we'll talk about maybe what's coming next from a smart
Yeah.
car, right? So I mentioned earlier, you've got this thing called zonal architecture, and it was commented a little bit in the press releases on the VW Rivian thing, right?
Mhm.
So what a lot of people don't realize today is when you're building an automobile, because they become so smart, you have to bring a lot of electricity to the back of the car, right? And so, the first car that my parents owned, there was no electronics back there. You wound up the window, you pulled the lock, right? You're lucky if you just had a light in the back, and that was it, right? And now you've got USB-C back there, you've got power windows, power doors, you might have a screen right there, you've got speakers
Entertainment, yes,
there,
right.
you've got a ton of sensors and then processors back there. And so what's happened with all of that, by having a centralized system, is you get these wiring harnesses that are huge. And when you're trying to build a car, you can't even bend those things. You need a robot to come and move and try to get those things. That's a lot of weight, that's a lot of manufacturing costs. And so one of the things that's happening you don't hear a lot about is splitting that up, and having 48 volt will help a lot, because you can send a lot more power through a smaller wire at a higher voltage. It's not running as much current. And then you can spread that current out in different zones with different intelligence
Mhm.
around the car. And so, yeah, you wouldn't think, what does it take to become a smarter car? A wiring harness needs to shrink, right? And so those are some of the things that are happening in the background that you generally don't think about.
Well, and you mentioned the operative phrase is weight. Weight is the bane of existence when it comes to battery life and the range of a car, and cost. By the way, something that's heavier, it requires more material, and that's a more costly situation. But let's face it, there's going to be a lot of innovation in the area that Infineon will bring to the equation.
Yep.
So again, let's talk. Remind us, what are the key advantages of leading the automotive segment? It's kind of a personal question, I guess, in many
Yeah.
ways. But you kind of hinted at the beginning of the podcast. What do you see? From your new vantage point.
Well, I would say one of the advantages, I guess, from my perspective, again, if I compare it to IoT, like I said, we have a super talented team, and we look at the market in different sub segments of the vehicle, and the team just knows everything that goes into those, sub applications, right, to the nth degree. Now I will say and here's one of the advantages. It's a lot easier to figure out what goes into a given application when you know the end product has four wheels, maybe two, right? So, with IoT it was completely different because you never knew. I mean, is this thing going to go on a thermostat or a cow, right? And how you figure out that subsystem and try to optimize, the way that you approach the market, the people that you hire, the whole thing, right? And so I would say that's one of the great advantages of leading an automotive segment is that you can really focus and dig into those. And the great news is that our team's been doing it for a while, and they're experts, and they really know where things are going. And so not surprisingly, the conversations that we have with our customer are very deep, very forward looking, and we're well embedded into where we're going collectively.
Yeah, I was about to go into to a degree because the engineers you have and the design experts you have that work with your partners, when I'll just make up a company. No, I won't do that because I don't want to. I don't want to, make that car company feel awkward. But let's say it's the Mark Vina automotive company that's been very successful. The reality is that your engineering folks really have to work very closely and very collaboratively because this is not the kind of setup where you're just selling a part off the shelf. I mean, in many ways, they don't have the engineering talent that you guys do in terms of really solving very complex problems. And you don't have I'm sure there's probably lots of examples you could give me, but that's a value add for Infineon, where a car company comes to you and says, you know what, we know we have to solve this problem. We have to do it in a very cost-effective way. It can't add $10,000 in cost to the car, but help us get there. And my guess is that you do more often than not have the expertise to solve problems like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the operative word you use is collaboration, right? Because where they want to go is also new for us, right? Because things are changing so quickly. And the good thing, and we're also working with companies that are a little bit new, right? Or people that are new, and so we can bring the years of experience we have as well as the desire to kind of step in new waters and figure things out together, right? And some of that is just let's just see if this thing works. Let's just let's design a PCB and throw it on there and see what happens,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So that's just super fun and exciting, right? And
It's got to be ultra cool.
yeah,
Got to be ultra cool to be in the middle of all of that.
yeah.
So I get this is a bit of an eye chart, but it does put things in perspective. And obviously, it's kind of a business slide. So let's talk. I'll let you kind of take this away, but obviously, it shows the growing importance of the revenue stream in the automotive segment for Infineon. But I'll let you add some more commentary to this.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the bottom part is the green, right? That shows the ICE stands for internal combustion engine, right? So non-EVs, still growing. I think if you went back, 10 years, that green would be really small, right? So that's been the big growth in the in the last 5-10 years is the turning it into a computer, as you said, right? But also all the electronics that are there, as well as some autonomy, right? So sensors, but then when you electrify it, it's full of power electronics, right? Whether you're charging it from the wall, charging it from some supercharger, you got to be able to handle all those different voltages, and then taking that power out of the battery and sending it, to these motors that can, generate 1,000 horsepower, right? It's really astounding. But then you got to manage those batteries and make them last. And I'm really confident that that these electric cars people are gonna easily get 20 years out of these things, right?
Oh yeah.
it's and that's just terrific. And you don't take them in, right? You just buy new tires if you're hitting 1,000 horsepower button too much, right? So yeah.
Well, we got a few minutes left here, and I really want to hit this topic because this is kind of like I'm asking you to put your prognostication hat on. What are some of the opportunities in automotive? What should we expect to be next? I mean, probably will give me some type of answer that will include AI. At least I hope you do, because AI obviously will create a brand new opportunity. And I know you had a slide in here around architecture, which obviously we should talk to. But give me your kind of 2 cents on where you think the world is going in this area.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk further out, definitely, I think that fully autonomous vehicles. I know it's what my kids want, right? My kids don't want to buy cars, right? And so they just would rather hail something. And already I hear a lot of people that are renting their cars, like you might rent an apartment, right? So going to cities and just renting someone else's car. When these things become fully autonomous, it's really going to change things again, right? And in order to get there, all the things that we talked about before, EV, architecture, charging, right? All that has to be in place, and really robust. And then of course the safety aspect is huge, and not just safety, but these things can't just stop in the middle of an intersection and wait for them to reboot, right? So there's a lot of AI that needs to get developed, right? There's a lot of compute that's going to have to happen all over this vehicle, and I think that's super interesting, right? I mean, if you look at the Waymo, it's all it relies on lidar, right? And they'll tell you, hey, you gotta use lidar for this thing, and then you have the folks in Fremont there saying, no, we're going to use cameras because in the end, that's all we have, right? We have two of them in our heads, and so it's that'll play out, and that's going to be super interesting. But I think that's when you start talking further way out there, I think that's going to be super interesting. And who knows what they're going to look like? I mean, if you don't have a driver in there, you just got a bunch of sensors. They're going to look different, that's for sure.
Well, think of the societal impact, of a completely autonomous driving experience on a massive mainstream level. In that, I think I saw some numbers where the average commute in the United States, I want to say, is like 43 minutes or 44 minutes, and that's the average, which means some people might be commuting 2 hours, 3 hours to work. There you go. In that, when you think about that, if you feel completely safe in an autonomous driving situation where you don't have to worry about the external environment, that's an hour of time that you get back to yourself. And that can be very valuable time where you're working, you're doing other things, you're entertaining yourself in some way, or the kids in the back of the car. But to me, there's really interesting societal implications of this that are good. And then, of course, you mentioned the safety component, because these cars are incredibly safe. And let's face it, if it doesn't, this category doesn't offer one more thing than saving people's lives or minimizing someone when they get into a car crash, God forbid, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. So, you look at the world, just 5 years from now, it's going to be an incredibly interesting environment to see in terms of people freeing up, being more productive. Hey, if I can free up an hour and a half while I'm in a car and not worry about being distracted by other things, that to me is a big deal.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's funny too. Other things you don't think about. I was reading an article that was contemplating a lot of this, and one of the things the author said was, down the road there's going to be a lot more sort of informal car clubs where people actually drive their cars, right? So it's like you go to these little racetracks just to drive. Hey, man, I drove a car today. How cool was that?
Yeah. Well, that could be really an interesting future thing that we'll all kind of laugh at. But why don't we wrap it up right there? Because Andrew, I'm sure we'll be talking again in the not too in the near future, because this is such an incredible topic to talk about. Thanks for taking the time to join me for today's podcast. For our viewing and listening audience, thanks for making the Smart Tech Check podcast part of your day or commute. Please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons. Let me bring that up very, very quickly so you can see those. And please hit like and subscribe so you can subscribe to my podcasts on a regular basis. You can also follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Mark Vina Tech Guide. Andrew, thanks for your time. And until next time, have a great week.
Thanks, Mark. Great talking.
Great.